Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bethany Kenyal, and I am the IATEFL Treasurer. It is a great pleasure and an honor to be here finally on this stage. Before I begin and introduce our plenary speaker, I would like to make a few wonderful announcements. Thank you to a couple of our key sponsors who have some interesting sessions to attend today. Language Cert attend their signature event in the auditorium at 5:25, which is entitled Cultivating a Culture of Care in ELT, in conversation with Kieran Donahue, and visit them on stand 34. Along with IELTS, attend their pop-up session in the exhibition hall later today at 11:40 for top 10 tips of IELTS Academic Writing Task 1, and catch them on stand 38 in the exhibition hall. For those of you who teach or manage a language school or institution, consider giving your team a huge professional development boost through IATEFL's institutional membership. This unique membership package can welcome up to 16 members of your institution and offers multiple IATEFL membership benefits. Plus, you will have access to several copies of IATEFL publications and share those amongst your team. And you'll have exclusive institutional discounts on advertising within IATEFL Voices and on the IATEFL jobs market. And speaking from direct experience, I can definitely say that there are definite benefits to having one's institution be a part of the IATEFL family. I'd be happy to have a quick chat with any of you about that, about the benefits for your institution, or for more information, please visit the IATEFL stand during a break time or at the IATEFL registration desk. For any writers in the audience, the IATEFL Voices editor will be on the IATEFL stand in the exhibition hall today between 10:15 a.m. and 11:45 a.m. if delegates or members wish to find out more about getting an article published. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my greatest honor to introduce our Day 2 plenary speaker. I would like to start by asking you a question. How many of you have a Divya in your life? Allow me to explain. Flashback to 2004. When I was a young MA in TEFL student at the University of London, getting a first real taste of theory and research, I personally found it all incredibly daunting. It was during these challenging times when I met our speaker for the first time. Divya was driven, motivated, and consistent. She churned out research papers that blew away our professors, and the rest of us were just in awe. I considered myself lucky to have been able to witness her insatiable hunger for excellence and how it has led to a successful career. From sharing a massive happy dance when Divya landed her dream job, teaching at one of France's top engineering schools, Centrale Supélec, to teaching and seeing the excitement that she felt when she became the leading EMI pioneer in France, and when she fearlessly founded France's first academic writing center for the Université Paris-Saclay. And yet, even with her incredibly busy schedule, she has volunteered for the IATEFL Teacher Development SIG. She coaches her school's debate team. Congrats on making it to the national semifinals last week. And she's now leading a huge international team of teachers as the director of the Department of Languages and Cultures at Centrale Supélec. Her tireless work has inspired countless individuals, many of whom are in the audience today. It is for her hard work and determination that I consider her an inspiration. I am forever grateful for her constant encouragement and belief in me, as it has helped me profoundly in my own professional path. I guess what I'm trying to say, you guys, what I'm trying to say is that what sets her apart is her incredible compassion, her tough love, and her unwavering belief that everyone we meet is capable of being our absolute best selves. And so for many of us here today, we've been here with you, Divya. You have been our Divya. You're my Divya. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming onto the stage our Day 2 plenary speaker, Divya Madhavan.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I am going to talk about coaching and mentoring as metaphors for leaning on the people around us. In ELT, we lean on each other an awful lot because it's how we grow as teachers. There are more traditional disciplines in education where teacher growth is more of a straight line. You go from a bachelor's to a master's to a PhD or a professional certification, and then you teach and you maybe do some research. ELT is not like that. Our realities are far messier. Some of us fall into ELT from other professions. So most of us study and get qualified while we work as teachers because it's the only way we can afford to do so. And all of us understand the value of moments like this conference, as so many of us pay our own way for professional development. So if you'll take a minute with me and look around this room at the incredible journeys that we all represent in coming together at IATEFL for 5 extraordinary days, I think you'll agree with me that our community goes beyond just professional ambition or professional development. We are fueled by a deep love of teaching and this infinite joy in discovering new dimensions to teaching and learning. I've been an English teacher for 25 years. I've done most jobs in ELT, from private tutoring to teaching in companies, from primary school to higher education and everything in between. And I've grown a lot in the process. And today, some of the choices and decisions that I make influence how the teachers I work with are able to grow. And I've come to realize that, many of the choices that we all make every day influence how the people around us grow. So in this talk, I'd like to invite you to reflect with me on what it means to be a teacher who supports other teachers. What it means to, nurture other teachers' trust, to help them find confidence, to give each other courage, and to show each other perseverance. I grew up in Malaysia in the 1980s. English was the language that I spoke at home, and like so many kids who grew up in Southeast Asia, there were lots of conversations around status issues about what kind of English, what accent, what register, what variety. And like so many of us in this room, I've had to casually and not so casually justify my connection to the English language at different moments in my career. And the most incredible thing that I've observed in these last few years especially is a leveling of the playing field when it comes to questioning the cultural and racial and gender privileges in our industry. And the conversation on inclusion is only just beginning. Today, I'm the director of a large language center in France with English teachers from Taiwan to Turkey via South Africa and Sweden. Teachers like us define the quality of English language teaching not only through how rich it is, but how far it reaches. This cultural shift of English as the world's international language has been challenging and moving our community forward for a long time. And with each stage, things get better and move forward, despite the journey having been quite messy. Change is messy because human beings are messy. Messiness is perhaps one of the most profoundly human qualities there is, because every human success is built in countless moments of failure and mess. And so, the starting point for my talk today is a mess. Well, not a mess, but the mess. The big mess of huge gaps in teacher pay around the world compared to other professions requiring similar levels of education. The mess of severely low-resourced environments in some parts of our community. The mess of most of us in this room having to work more than one teaching job to pay our rent and look after our families. Our incoming IATEFL president, Alex Popovsky, gave a talk in Malta in October, where she raised more than one sujet qui fâche, more than one sore point, regarding the working conditions of ELT teachers. I sat in the room and watched her full of admiration as she spoke her truth and took quite a lot of heat in the questions afterwards. And she took all this with incredible grace, and it made me reflect, as I reflected on this powerful but disturbing talk in the weeks after the conference. I realized that the incredible thing is, in all this mess, we show up. We have this incredible capacity to put aside our difficulties and show up for our students. And teachers showing up is what has kept education moving forward since the beginning of time. A millennium ago, language teachers, there probably weren't English teachers yet, they were probably Latin and Greek teachers, witnessed the birth of higher education, and so began teaching things like critical thinking. They taught language, but they also probably had to do a lot of convincing parents to send their children to school in the first place. 5 centuries ago, English teachers like us had access to the printing press and taught things like literacy and grammar, and they helped their students aspire to higher level jobs because education became more widespread. 1 century ago, English teachers like us had the singular status of teaching not just a language, but the language of the most powerful colonial force in the world. And as the political world shifted and recentered, English became everyone's language, infused with the diversity that makes it all our own today. And so here we are, English teachers in 2023. Where computer scientists are flirting wildly with biologists, as philosophers tag along on the date as a little bit of a third wheel. Where we are in the era where higher education is being turned on its head by artificial intelligence. We are in the era of how-to guides, where everything from dieting to dreaming has advice. And expertise has become ubiquitous. And so, we are in the era of information overload, where language inundates us from every possible direction. The winners who will write this phase of history will be those who can see and think and communicate clearly. Clear communication has never been more essential to the advancement of society, and as teachers of language, our role is more important than it has ever been, and we continue to show up. Teachers show up, and that's amazing. They show up as teachers, coaches, as mentors, as nurturers, as lifelines, supporters, role models, underdogs, and cheerleaders in this complex landscape that is language teaching. Showing up deserves celebration, and showing up for each other deserves recognition. So I'd like to focus on two neighboring roles to teaching today: coaching and mentoring. Why are they relevant to our context? They're relevant because they help us frame different roles that teachers can take and better envision the kinds of spaces that we, teachers and education managers, would like to create and invest in for our teachers' growth. So, what is coaching? Coaching is all about honing specific skills and behaviors related to a task or a role. I'm a debating coach. I select and train students for competitive debates. I build an incredibly close bond with my debaters, yet this bond is laser focused on our debating goals. The same goes for a football coach or a careers coach. There is a specific area that needs to evolve, and the coach's role is to guide their person, their client, their student, their colleague towards evolving successfully. Today, I will stick to this very broad definition of coaching as a natural extension of the teaching persona, and I'm respectfully disassociating the professional certifications related to coaching from this discussion, because those are actual career paths that people grow into. They stop being English language teachers and they become a professional coach. So it's a little bit of a different conversation to what I'm trying to have. Now, here's the thing. A successful coach doesn't necessarily have to be an expert in the subject. What really counts is their ability to bring out the expertise and the skill in the person that they're coaching and help them achieve their goals. Coaches themselves need coaching sometimes. At a particularly difficult time in my current role, I was coached by a crisis management coach, with whom I had the most amazing journey. And I found out many months later that he actually coached firefighters in his day job and helped them with stress management. But his coaching was so effective with me because he had the skills and the methodology, and it didn't quite matter which precise industry his clients came from. And so coaching is maybe the more natural relationship that we have with our students. What is mentoring? Mentoring is a little different. You can't mentor a team of debaters into winning a tournament. You can't mentor a squad of footballers into winning a championship. Mentoring takes time. This time spills across multiple spaces, and these multiple spaces reveal multiple goals. Having a mentor is like having your own special Yoda, someone who has this expert knowledge of the Force and guides you through the ups and downs of life. And in mentoring, subject knowledge is key. You need someone who really knows their stuff to help you navigate all these complex challenges and grow as a person. And here's the thing with mentoring. You have to know your stuff. You have to be on an expertise building journey yourself before people can look up to you and be mentored. And so mentoring is perhaps the more natural relationship we have with our fellow teachers. In each of these three roles, the positioning of the teacher shifts. We go from teaching and enabling learning to facilitating development and performances that thrive to supporting and inspiring. And each of these practices create a sort of echo within us. They provide spaces for reflection and introspection. They encourage us to rise above and take a different perspective, and most importantly, they hold up a profoundly human mirror for stories that resemble our own. So, we don't all know each other very well yet. I've met many of you, but not all of you yet. But I'm pretty sure that there are a few things, there are a few modes of being that I share with each and every one of you. Let me venture a couple of examples. I love my students. I love my students so much that I do things that really aren't in my job description. I bring them food, cake especially, when I have quite a lot of work for them to do for me. I'm a debating coach, and during tournament season, my debaters work really, really hard, and I churn out these vast amounts of cake. My main coaching strategy there is perhaps that an army marches on its stomach. I love my students so much that I dedicate my evenings and my weekends to rewriting perfectly good teaching material to make sure that I adapt it to this particular class that I have this particular week. I also make sure that I complain to my whole family about how annoying it is to have to spend my weekends on my teaching. These going the extra mile gestures are universal in the world of teaching. It doesn't matter that I teach in France and that some of you might teach 1,000 or 10,000 miles away. We all know what it is to find that little bit of extra energy in the tank when it's necessary and when we deem it necessary, and show up. And so the question I asked when I started writing this talk was, who shows up for teachers? I don't need 50 minutes to answer that question. It's fairly straightforward. It's other teachers. I am going to talk about how we show up for each other by sharing stories of 4 teachers whose work I have leaned on at different moments in my career. These 4 teachers aren't my best friends, they're not my colleagues, they're not my former teachers, they're not people I've recruited. They're just people whose work inspired me and made me look up and look forward at different moments in my journey. These are people who showed up for me without necessarily knowing that they were showing up for me, because these are people whose legacies are in the collective spaces. They are people who've changed their worlds without necessarily being the ones who changed their worlds. This is often how it happens in our community, isn't it? And so these are people who lean on others and are leaned on. One is in the audience today. The other one is online. The other one probably isn't. And the final one had never even heard of IATEFL or the ELT community before I got in touch with her, having worked up the nerve to ask her for an interview. I interviewed each of these 4 teachers about coaching and mentoring as I prepared for this talk. And I'd like to invite you to reflect on them with me, and to reflect on how these teachers make their environments more resilient through coaching and mentoring. And I'd also like to invite you to reflect on these 4 talks under the 4 philosophies that I've come to understand are key to teacher resilience: trust, confidence, courage, and perseverance. Let's dive in with our story of trust. Vicky is one of us. She is so emblematic of what keeps ELT environments running. She teaches while questioning teaching environments. She adopts new technologies while ensuring their sustainability. And she trains teachers by standing alongside them instead of standing above them. Vicky's version of showing up is reflected in her critical dialogue with adapting learning technologies and working differently with different groups of teachers as she implements large-scale change.
I designed a project where we would move from a traditional curriculum into a project-based learning curriculum with everything that that entails, which was huge, huge amounts of work. But what I find interesting is that this meant a lot of mentoring the teachers to be able to carry out such a project. Especially mentoring teachers into the mindset shift necessary for an effective implementation of project-based learning. What I did is, instead of trying to push for it in a top-down manner, is I went to my most experienced teacher and I sat down with her and I said, look, I have this idea and I would like to know what you think of it and if you would be on board with making a huge change to the way we work at school. And of course I had been there for many years, and I think this also relates to the trust you build as a leader where you work. And so this teacher went like, if you think this is a good idea, I'm on board and we'll do whatever it takes. And so it was pretty easy then when we put it forward to all the rest of the teachers, because me and the most experienced teacher were on board and were happy with the changes. I think it was this teacher who was right on board from the very beginning, but then when we started implementing doing project-based learning in the classroom, she was used to more traditional teaching, so she was used to doing PPP all the time, and so it took a lot of work to work together to find other alternatives to presenting language specifically, for example. That was one of her main issues. Like, she was really worried that the learners would not have the language they needed to carry out certain projects. And we worked together to identify other ways of introducing language and other moments to introduce language, and to be a little more laid back in terms of, okay, let's wait, let's see what language emerges from students, let's see what they really need, and let's try to work on that language when they need it, not when we decide. Well, I think that first of all, we need to make sure we understand and empathize with the teachers' workload realities. And then make sure we can support their struggles rather than adding to them. And especially in my country, in Argentina, most teachers work in many schools, 2, 3, even 4. Each school with their own requirements and expectations. So it's a really challenging reality, which can easily make teachers overwhelmed. So taking that into account and trying to figure out, okay, what is really important and what can be left out of the equation. I think a resilient teacher is a teacher that can adapt to the ever-changing realities of teaching and learning, whether it's in terms of new methodologies, approaches, technological tools, whatever, but also in terms of the cultural and generational differences of their learners. So I think a resilient teacher is open to change, is open to experimenting and trying new things, and that. And a community, well, I think a resilient community is one that supports their teachers in these struggles.
What I learned from interviewing Vicky is that change is implemented by creating new habits. And getting us teachers to do anything new can only work if we are trusted to do it. People tend to talk about trust in the workplace like it's one thing, but it's actually a very layered concept, and not everyone gives it the same importance. Trust among teachers doesn't work the same as it does in a collocations dictionary. It can't simply be built or broken. These actions are maybe too precise, too instantaneous. Trust is cultivated, it is demonstrated, it is prolonged once it's been earned. These are the messier realities within which we need to work. Trust is the essential ingredient for habit building in educational environments. James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, reminds us of how incremental a process habit building is. He says every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. So while there isn't a single instant that's transformative, as these votes build up, so will the evidence of your new identity. And Vicky reminds us of this too in the trust negotiation that she plays with her teachers in the mentoring process. So now let's turn to our story of confidence. Barb is also one of us. To me, she has always been someone who makes a lot of magic in the margins. She is the muscle behind ITDI, which functions in a very similar way to IATEFL. It's a space that provides professional development that is affordable and accessible, with ideals like teacher empowerment and community building. For me, Barb's story is inseparable from the role that she's played in building a sustainable teacher development model through a community of highly skilled contributors who provide a space for teachers to lean on.
So I don't think there's any one set of roles that teachers take on. I think the ones that I see most frequently in the teachers that I would consider to be exceptional teachers is that they create a community in their classroom. Either, and teacher trainer is the same thing, that they create a community where people, whether it's students or other teachers, feel safe. They feel like they can make mistakes and nobody will make fun of them. Or they feel like they belong. And when you teach, sometimes your classroom is the only safe place. You know, I sat in a plenary once with Penny and she asked the audience to raise their hands if they were a learner or a teacher. It's very trendy to be a learner right now. So, most of the people in the audience, raise their hands like, I'm a learner, yeah, lifelong learning, I'm a learner. And then, we're supposed to have our heads bowed. Of course, I'm peeking. And I'm thinking, so, it's like, how many people see themselves as teachers? When I was in my teacher training program, they asked us to identify our teaching style. And, I'm a benevolent despot. I make the decisions in my class. That may mean that I have a very student-centered project, or I might hand over the control to the students, but it's a choice that I make because I'm the teacher. And we sort of put teaching at a lower level than learning. I mean, you can't be a teacher without learning, right? Any good teacher is always learning because, right, you have to stay ahead of everything that's out there. But ultimately, the one thing that a teacher can do that other people cannot is teach. The idea that if you bring a group of teachers together, they will teach each other, basically, and that becomes mentoring. If we have teachers working together, whether they're in a course or whether they're in discussion with a course or whether they're on social media in between courses, I mean, community is wherever the teachers are. It's not, I think that was actually a blessing in having a forum that was so clunky. We found that our teachers could connect with each other wherever they happened to hang out, right? And when we started, it was back when most teachers had not met anybody online that they didn't already know. It was still very much a posting cat pictures and my lunch era on Facebook. If you bring in, especially like young learner teachers or non-fluent English speaking teachers, because teaching ability is not the same as language ability.
Of course not, yeah.
Right. And so if you bring in teachers who have a variety of backgrounds, and they believe that people are interested in what they have to say, then they start gaining confidence. And once they have confidence, then they start talking to other people. And then they start going to conferences or doing webinars or putting themselves out there because they know they've got a cheering section.
Yes.
Right? People who are going to tell them that they're wonderful. And it's not false praise. It's not trying to build somebody up just because. But it's people who genuinely think that you're wonderful.
What I learned from interviewing Barb is that these frameworks of coaching and mentoring are built. They are built on purpose and they're built with purpose. And they need to be given space and recognition in order for them to work, because cultivating new habits requires space. And she's right when she says that we sometimes have a tendency to see our classrooms as having two sides, a teaching side and a learning side. But what if we were to just consider the role of a teacher in a more nuanced version? Henry Giroux has had us questioning for decades whether teaching is about being the sage on the stage or being the sage on the stage or the guide on the side. That's it. And as we reflect on how confidence is built, I think it's also important to reflect on where confidence is built. Confidence is built in the social environment of a classroom, with all its complex human mechanism. And so while critical pedagogy is no stranger to ELT, in many education management contexts, we need reminding of its lessons in questioning the social mechanisms that we take for granted. So speaking of taking things for granted, I'd like to now move to our story of courage. Patricia is a school leader who worked in the UK in the 1970s, and then in South America, and more recently in Southern Africa. She's amazing. Please Google her. I met her about 10 years ago when we were both students on a course, and I was very impressed by her capacity to zoom out and to always see the big picture of what was really happening. And so, when I found myself on the journey of preparing this talk, I reached out to her. Her last role was as principal of Waterford Kamlaba United World College in Eswatini. She is the first woman of color to have headed the school.
I think the resilience and the possibility of resilience is created within the environment of the school. And a teacher who may have been very resilient in one environment may not be in another because of that school environment. And so one of the really important roles that I think a leader within a school plays is to create that environment in which everybody can feel safe. Yeah? And if you feel safe, and if you feel that you can be who you want to be, then it is possible for you to try things out, perhaps fail, and know that there is a whole body of people who will support you to be successful with your students. One of the first questions I ask a new teacher to the school, not necessarily a new teacher, but a new teacher to the school, is why are you here? That's the only question I ask, and I ask everybody, school, teacher, receptionist, bus driver, whoever works in the school, why are you here? Because what I'm looking for is some answers that will allow us to be a community together in order for us to support each other. You know, very recently in my last school, we went through civil unrest, right? The school was closed. There was a lot of dangerous violence around us. And coming together every day to make sure that everybody is okay created a kind of resilient environment, both of students and teachers, because we were in a boarding school. Which meant that it didn't matter what happened, we knew that we were there for each other. Actually, people began to step up to the plate in ways that I could never have imagined otherwise. And actually, I did too, you know, when at 2 o'clock in the morning, it was freezing cold outside and I had to do my rounds of the school. Sometimes, you know, I didn't want to go out there. It's really interesting when you begin to understand the multi-talents that you have as an individual, as a professional. And so when individual teachers understand how talented they are, how much they have within them to give, because they are in environments where they can show that and can try things out and become the person that they want to be. I think that's also very rewarding for me as a co-coach in that situation. It's never one, you know, it's always, you do these things together. You don't, you know, you're not the expert in all of this. You know, I never have felt that way. You know, you follow the 7 steps of this or the 5 habits of the other, and you know, everything will be okay. And it's not that way. Although we are such a multicultural, multilingual, multi-ethnic world, and especially in cities where you may have colleges and schools and international schools, the way in which schooling is done hasn't really changed over the last 100 years or so. And the power is still in the hands of very few. And it is important for us to open up education to what it really is, the people who are part of that, part of education, and to have, representation is not enough. To have a black woman as a head of a school is not enough. There needs to be a huge shift in decolonizing education in a way that really is accepting of others.
What I learned from interviewing Patricia is that we all need courage when we show up. Having courage shapes our every decision. The battles we choose to fight, the ones we choose to lose, the ones that we bring back to the table later, and the ones that we leave behind. These are all decisions and actions that are rooted in courage. Courage is speaking up, and courage is also acting up when necessary. Pedagogy of the Oppressed taught me everything I know about what matters about being a teacher. I have read it again and again, and each time found a little more meaning in this tiny 100-page book written by the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire in the 1970s. It's a book that's helped me recenter and reprioritize when things get too busy or too blurry. And where are things recentered and reprioritized? It's in our collective critical consciousness, which is the whole point of this beautiful mess that is education. The point is that each of our students should leave our classrooms a small step closer to being a change agent in society. Because the English language is a language and an international culture, but it is also a very powerful currency in the world today. And as teachers of the English language, we shape its exchange rate. And so we need courage to choose the right kinds of change that will move us all forward one step at a time. The final interview I'd like to share with you is of a high school leaver in 2005 who was on a gap year and met a young 6-year-old child who had to do hard labor instead of go to school due to extreme poverty. This then student used her babysitting money that she had saved up to send this child and other children to school, and she very quickly realized how much there was to be done. Today, she has built a children's home, a women's center, and a school in Circuit, Nepal, and is the legal guardian to over 50 children. She is the sort of person for whom teaching and coaching and mentoring comes so naturally because her labor of love is in the messiest of human realities, educating and protecting children in remote, under-resourced environments. It is my absolute honor to introduce this last interview with the CEO of the Blink Now Foundation, 2015 CNN hero, Maggie Doyne, our story of perseverance.
we work in Midwestern Nepal, empowering and educating children struggling from marginalized backgrounds of vulnerability, and in the space of orphan care. Our kind of core belief and vision is to create a world where every single child is safe and educated and loved. We work as a full service community school model. When I say full service, I'm talking about kind of schools as a hub and a center for community. So it's an integrative approach where we bring in health and wellness and community and families and the food system and you know, literacy, the women in the community, connection to nature, so that the school, in a sense, serves more as a community space and a hub, even more so than just sort of like a center for education. Probably one of the biggest challenges that we have is retaining, recruiting, and developing our teachers. In order to run a quality school, we all know that the magic is within the teachers, it's everything. So keeping teachers respected, like putting respect on their paycheck, like making sure that this is a profession where they see a future, where they see their own growth, where they have joy and fulfillment, making sure that as a culture, as a society, as an organization, we are holding them in that sort of esteem. So strategically, logistically, kind of ethos-wise, it's a huge part of our focus and something that we're working on. So it's almost, we've had a lot of luck with working with young, fresh teachers who are coming in, you know, bright-eyed, ready to learn, ready to think outside the box. Yeah, I would definitely call it a coaching, mentoring model where we're using co-teachers, teaching teams, different experts kind of modeling examples, but then coming in and watching and guiding, bringing in strategies and building capacity. So we bring in, we're pairing up the teachers with more senior teachers or folks who have been here longer and have had that training. There's also, I think, onboarding. Really making sure that the onboarding process is strong culturally so that we know that we're a fit for each other and people kind of know what we're getting into. So one of the things that we've worked on with the TA programming and the, you know, coaching mentorship model is the onboarding program and a recruiting strategy to make sure we're getting the right kind of people. So for me, I look for intuition, or a very intuitive teacher, a strong sense of self. Like it's in them. Intuition kind of can seem a little bit like I don't know, Pollyanna or ethereal, but what I'm saying is like a sense of self, a sense of knowing oneself, standing confidently in who they are and believing and trusting. I love seeing a teacher with the raw, intuitive and kind of organic sense, which is it intuition? Is it nature? Is it nurture? I don't know, but I think some people really have it. Like there's those born teachers and you see that in people, you see that the joy, you see the way they come alive in the classroom. And then resilience, I mean, resilience is really about falling and failing and getting back up and showing up again. You know, like after a hard day or a hard lesson or a hard few months, are you still in it? And are you still coming back for more?
What I learned from interviewing Maggie is that perseverance is about dreaming these big, bold dreams that keep our worlds magical. and give us the momentum that we need to keep moving forward. So I mentioned at the beginning of this talk that we all know what it is to find that little bit of extra in the tank. And people like Maggie remind us of how big the tank is. These 4 incredible educators have shown us the poetry with which we English language teachers connect dots that span the entire world. And we embody this most vital culture of fostering greater tolerance in the world through better quality communication. Our strength as a community has always been in the collective space, and we will only grow more resilient by honoring and celebrating each other every chance we get, as I hope I have done for you today. I began this talk by walking you through English teachers showing up through the ages, 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, and today. Today, our outstanding prowess in technology and language learning is coupled with plummeting enrollments in English degrees in higher education over the world. Today, we are embracing large language models and AI with a nervous look over our shoulder as to what this really means for sustainable, global language teaching and learning. What will our students look like in 50 years, in 100 years? Will there even be a planet to inhabit in 1,000 years, or would we, in our hubris, have destroyed it? We don't know. But I do know this: we're here, and this, us, and future us's, with our profoundly human gazes, are irreplaceable. So in the spirit of IATEFL, let's celebrate the irreplaceability of teachers showing up. Thank you very much.